Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. Video gaming, as a form of entertainment, has faced by far and away more than its fair share of troubles over the past couple of decades. Over the years, it has been derided as a form of entertainment and been labeled childish, and adults were ridiculed for enjoying video games during its early incarnations. This, of course, in turn reinforced the nerd and geek stereotype culture that took firm root in the 80s and 90s, painting gamers and nerd culture in general as physically weak, socially awkward misanthropes that distance themselves from the rest of society and even from each other. Indeed, it is only within the last decade where that stereotype has finally been abolished by the majority of society, and gaming is more of an accepted normality than anything else. In addition to that, video games have been nonsensically attributed to increased violence in children and adults alike, in spite of a wealth of scientific data that proves there is absolutely no correlation between the two. This sort of nonsensical thought process has been carried through as a false stigma of video games for as long as I can remember. Even back in the 1980s, I'd heard people saying that violent video games increased people's propensity towards violence. This stigma and the mountains of scientific data that qualitatively disproves such nonsense has apparently never reached the eyes and ears of the government officials of the country of Uzbekistan, who have apparently decided to ban a fairly long list of video games, stating that the games could be, quote, used to propagate violence, pornography, threaten security, and social and political stability. In addition to that, they stated that these games might disturb civil peace and inter-ethnic and inter-religious harmony. Among those games banned are Dead Space, Fallout New Vegas, Silent Hill, Shadow Warrior, The Sims 3 and 4, and Mass Effect, to name but a few. The full list will be in a link down in the description below. Now, as a gamer, games critic, and self-proclaimed pundit, I have a severe personal abhorrence to this particular decision by the Uzbekistani government. It reminds me of some very disturbing historical parallels that we'll get into in a moment. But first, let's discuss these particular concerns that this country's officials have with these particular video games. Now, of course, I'm going to couch my arguments from a Western-based mentality. I am an American, and I do understand that the freedoms afforded me by my citizenship are not the same the world over. That said, the thought process behind the ideas that video games can propagate violence and threaten social and political stability is in fact demonstrably false. Indeed, the only evidence that can be found of video games having any form of political influence anywhere in the world that I could find was from 2008, where the Entertainment Software Association here in the United States announced that they had created a Political Action Committee, or PAC as it is commonly known, to donate money to game-friendly politicians and candidates. Also, in regards to the idea that video games propagate violence, I could quite easily point the Uzbekistani officials to any number of studies that prove qualitatively that there is no correlation between video games and violence by merely searching the internet for less than 2 seconds. It seems very much to me that this ban is indeed direct censorship and shows a clear and blatant lack of understanding as to what video games are really capable of and what they are not. Video games, in addition to being forms of entertainment, provide a wealth of other beneficial factors for a wide variety of people. Games with online components allow those with social anxiety disorders to be able to interact with people from around the world in a safe, comfortable environment. Indeed, many psychologists actively make use of video games to treat these issues every day. In addition to that, virtual reality games help people deal with much more severe issues like combating agoraphobia. Also, video games allow players to experience a wide variety of characters and situations, both fictional and non, to a staggering degree of variety. Indeed, video game culture has expanded to a point where some games one could make a reasonably successful argument for them being works of art. Of course, this premise is still fairly new and mostly derided or dismissed outright, much the same way that movies were treated once upon a time when some made arguments for certain films as being works of art. Now, many movies are most definitely regarded as works of art, but the medium of video gaming is so unlike any other form of entertainment that it's not been accepted into those circles as yet, which is a shame, really. Take Mass Effect, for example. It is on the list of banned games, I'm guessing because of the violence. This game series, ignoring the most recent installment, is one of the most beloved franchises of the past decade. But why? It certainly wasn't because of the gameplay or the graphics. Those aspects of the games were always just a step behind the industry as a whole. But what it did have was an amazing story. A story that unfolded the fate of a cast of characters over the course of over 90 hours of gameplay. A story that the player was very much involved in a visceral way that one simply cannot achieve with books or movies. It was because of the choices you made and the relationships developed over an extended period of time that made those games so utterly unforgettable. They allowed one to travel the stars, fight an enormous threat that endangered the entire human race and other races as well. They allowed you to engage in debates of morality over who lived and who died. It allowed you to discuss philosophical points of morality to a certain degree and to see the results of your decisions played out in a real and meaningful way. Such games offer a sense of accomplishment that gamers sometimes simply do not get in their daily lives. They're an escape, much in the same way that some people like to curl up by the fire with a good book or get cozy with their favorite movies. Gamers like to sit down and play their favorite games. Sometimes to feel that challenge of pitting one's skill against another or a group of people like in StarCraft or Dota or any other number of competitive games, or sometimes to relax and do some crafting in their favorite MMO, or even to interact with their favorite characters in their favorite RPG or narrative experience. You see, games are so much more versatile than other forms of media simply because of the aspect of player choice and player agency of the person playing the game. Your decisions and your interaction with the environment makes it a unique experience that is tailored to your own personal style of play. You simply do not get that with books or movies. It is these wonderful experiences that can be both amazing stories and fantastic ways of entertaining and even educating oneself that Uzbekistan is banning. I stated before that this is censorship, and it very much is. So many people out there do not understand that this medium has only begun to explore the depths of its potential, and it is very much the more modern form of entertainment. Throughout history, we've seen countless instances of censorship. In 399 BC, Socrates was sentenced to drink poison for his corruption of youth and his acknowledgement of unorthodox divinities. In 1543, the Catholic Church decreed that no book could be printed or sold without permission of the Church. Indeed, 16 years after that, in 1559, Pope Paul IV ordered the first Index Librorum Prohibitorum, or Index of Prohibited Books. And why? Well, those books did not conform to the ideals of the faith of the Church or the government it supported. And here we have a continuation of that. This list of 34 games banned by the government of Uzbekistan is their own modern index of prohibited books. It is a repeat of history and not one that should ever be allowed in the modern era. And I have to ask, what if they were to ban Macbeth? It is an extremely violent work. Or while we're at it, just ban any book, movie, or game that has anyone harmed at all. After all, the death of fictional characters somehow promotes violence, yes? You see, it's all the same, whether it be books, movies, or games. They are all an important medium that can both entertain and educate. And it seems it is that very aspect and lack of understanding that is forcing Uzbekistan to repeat history best left where it belongs, in the history books. Thank you very much for watching. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. Games have seen me through some fairly dark times in my past, and they're much more than a simple form of entertainment to my mind. They are works of fantastic fiction that are on par with written novels. They are tools of education and of learning new ideas and thoughts that can challenge one's own beliefs. They can make one laugh. They can make one strive to do better and learn how to play to a higher standard. They can promote increased hand-eye coordination and a sense of accomplishment, and yes, they can even bring one to tears on occasion. Games are all this and more, and the thought of them being censored due to a lack of understanding and by those coming from a position of ignorance is troubling in the extreme. I very fervently hope that someday soon this decision is reversed and these forms of censorship are best left in the past. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. I'll see you next time.